the time. This is my love language.
Can anybody tell if we're live streaming yet?
It says live on custom live stream.
We are live. So now let me get back over here to where I'm supposed to be. And hello, everybody. Thank you for coming tonight to the class of Torah for the Nations. Terry and I are here kind of filling in for Rabbi Pesach. And we have Amuela and Thomas and Veronica Port. And my wife, of course, is Annie Helton. I'll have to tell you one of these days how I lost her in the hospital during our first child, but we will not do that at this time. And so, Terry, we're so looking forward to what you have prepared for us tonight. But I would like to start off, as we try to every time. We want to remember to give tzedakah, to give to charity. And tonight, I'm not going to put this all the way in yet because I have some people who have contacted us, Terry, with some dedications and some so I want to dedicate this charity and this tonight to Cliff and Harleen from Knoxville, Tennessee. Also Roger Newman from right here in Maryville, Tennessee. Anthony, I don't know Anthony's last name. He lives in California. They're looking for a healing. And Betty Clark in Illinois. Now that Cliff and Harleen, Terry, I don't know if I can, their last name is Hoole. Is that how?
I'm not sure.
Hoole, but we want to recognize them tonight. Also in blessed memory of Jerry Baker from Indiana, and Judy, we do not have her last name, from Fort Wayne, Indiana. Now, also, I want to give this tzedakah, this charity tonight, thanking the Creator for the things that He's done. It wasn't just our prayers, but it was a collective of prayers of many people. And as we pray for these requests, it's a collective prayer, and we lift that up to the Creator. And maybe you have someone you want us to pray about, something, somebody. And maybe you have somebody who has left this walk of life and you want us to remember them in our time of tzedakah. Please send that here to us, and we will gladly do that. So thank you, Baruch Hashem. Thank you for that. Okay, Terry, are you about ready to get us underway here tonight?
Yes, and I would like to add to the dedication of the Torah learning tonight as well, on behalf of my son-in-law, Landon, who has been diagnosed with the COVID. He's at home. He's been having the fevers and bedridden quite a while. And my daughter, she's been tested, but it hadn't come back yet. She's not been feeling well, but she's also been under a lot of, my daughter, Amber, my eldest daughter, she's been under a lot of stress. She's in a master's program, getting her master's degree, working a full-time job, taking care of a sick husband. And I think she finally just, it all caught up with her this week. She's had to go to the hospital and get some checks out because they're just not feeling good either. So I just want to dedicate the Torah learning tonight also on behalf of them and everyone else that Scotty's mentioned as well, that Refuah Shalema, a speedy recovery for those who are needing healing, and the soul lifted up before the Creator for those of blessed memory. And so we just want to remember everyone and dedicate the teaching of the Creator on behalf of those who need a touch from Him. Anything else, Scotty?
No, I believe that's it, Terry. I just want to say again, thank everybody for coming, those that's listening on YouTube and those that are joining us with through Facebook.
Yes. And the radio station?
And oh, yes, Power Faith Radio.
Yes.
We started a radio station several years back, and Baruch Hashem, we're so glad that it's now a full NORHID radio station. So those of you that would like more details about that, you can get that on your phone or get that on the on your internet, and you can contact me and we will get you that information. All right, Terry, I don't want to take too much more time because I know you are filled up tonight.
That's not a problem. Tonight, as we begin to we're going to work ourselves into the prohibition of theft. And I've got a place we're going to start. The place I'm starting is for a reason why. And in my studies in this, come across some really, really good teachings from the Torah sages about this that I wanted to go through before we actually get into the study of the prohibition of theft. But this is where we're at. We're taking the first steps into the doorway of learning that. We're going to look again at the very beginning of Parshas Noach, Genesis 6, verse 9. And it says in the Art Scroll Humish, these are the offspring of Noah. Noah was a righteous man, perfect in his generation. Noah walked with God. Now, we've covered this passage before, talking about how Hashem designed the Torah that before he even fathered children, physical children, the Creator says his offspring was that he was a righteous man and a righteous man, perfect in his generations. Now, the Hebrew for righteous is tzaddik. He was a tzaddik. And perfect is tamim. What we're going to do is get my notes up here so I don't get ahead of myself. But we're going to look, because it's very important that we look at these two words, the tzaddik and tamim, because these are two areas that go in line with what happens a few verses down with the issue of the flood. We're going to be looking at that. A lot of people, they read Genesis as children's stories, Sunday school classes for the kids. We need to understand that the Torah means instruction. It also means law, means commandments. It gives us direction for life. So when they're reading the story of Noah, it's always Noah and the ark and the flood, the rainbow. But they read it as a story, almost like I said, a children's story, instead of looking at the lessons that the Creator put there for us to learn. It's an eternal document. The Creator does not waste one word in his Torah. So we have to look and see what he's saying. And he is actually saying a whole lot for you and I. This is recorded for us to this day.
So Terry, I'm sorry, I don't mean, when you said that, I just got to bring this in right now. I think you said something here a while back. The Torah was not written to us, but it was written for us. Is that correct? Is that
right?
Correct?
It's written for. Now understand, it's the heritage of Israel, and again, Psalms 147. The Creator did not give the nations his words, his decrees, nor his ordinances. He gave it to Israel. After Mount Sinai, before Mount Sinai, from Noah all the way through to Abraham, it was passed down. family to family to family. It was orally taught. Not one word was written down until Moses wrote the first words down that the Creator commanded him to write. So after Sinai, the rules and regulations that was passed down from Adam to Abraham now falls underneath the Sinai covenant. Their authority comes from Moses, the prophet of God, the main prophet of God, who would deliver the words of God to his people. And then his people was entrusted with this as guardians, as we spoke about in the last couple of lessons. And then they are the priests of the nation, and we are the congregation, and they bring it to us. So the Torah was given for humanity, but it has a path. It has a path that the Creator set it on. And today, that path is from him to Moses, Moses to the nation of Israel, from the nation of Israel to us in the authority of Moses. And we have to understand that. No one else has the authority of the Torah above Moses other than the Creator. He chose Moses to be his scribe. And so I want to bring this out because when we get into understanding Tzaddik and Tamim, what this means, it's very important. Hold on, let me get over. I've got about half a dozen books of mine stacked up here, so when I study, I go through it.
That's a mark of a great teacher right there.
So the offspring of Noah, his prodigy, is to be a tzaddik, righteous, and tamim. And I prefer the Hebrew words. If someone has questions, message Scotty and he'll get them to me if it's a little bit over. But just tamim is translated as complete, perfect, simple. It has, depending on how it's used within a sentence, it has a variety of English words it can be. But tamim, you'll see what I'm talking about here in a second. Rabbi Hirsch goes on and says that tzaddik, and it's talking about this passage, is one who gives everyone and everything their due. In respect, a tzaddik is related to an Aramaic word that means to satisfy, to give what is due. A tzaddik is objective toward everything. He looks at everything from the standpoint of his duty and not from the standpoint of his own personal interest. Primarily, a tzaddik represents, and it means social justice, the expression of deeds and actions. He was also tamim. And he talks about the path of the tamim is one who remains pure even when satisfying his physical aspirations. Tamim is related to another word that means to refrain from all speech and movement, an Aramaic word which means to be closed. Thus, the basic meaning of tamim is self-control. A tamim unites all his aspirations and masters them from within himself. One moral will master all of his aspirations. External allurement will not remove them from his control, and his moral integrity cannot be impaired. So technically, a tamim means self-control, and you have moral integrity. And see, that's important. I don't have enough desk. I'm going to lay my ständer down here so I can lay books on top of books. Oh, they say, you never have enough. It's not that you have too many books. You don't have enough shelf space. Well, that's my problem. All right. Here's the reason why I wanted to bring up righteousness and him being perfect. I mean, tzaddik and parmim, because the next, the passage in verse 11 says, "Now the earth become corrupt before God, and the earth had become filled with robbery." Corrupt here in the Hebrew for corrupt means it became immoral and idolatrous. And robbery represents the injustice. It was injustice. The corruption is the opposite of tamim, and robbery is the opposite of tzaddik, of righteousness. Scotty, can I throw a cold one on you?
I reckon you can try.
Are you able to quickly pull up Genesis 6:11 in the Hebrew?
Yeah. Are you recording?
Oh shoot, no, I'm not.
Okay, go ahead. Go ahead and start recording while I pull that up.
I've totally forgot. It's been one of those weeks.
Sorry about that. Genesis, I should have already told you. Genesis, what again?
6:11.
6:11.
Hold on, I dropped my notes.
Sorry about that. This is live, folks. We're not.
Hey, it's been one of them weeks already. Okay, we're only here to win. Only here at Wednesday. I'm just hoping it's up. Smooth sailing for the next few days. Scotty did not, by the way, know that I was going to ask him this.
No, and
he's always throwing code ones on me. I finally got to throw a code one.
You did, and I got it ready. You want me to share it?
Yeah, share the Hebrew of Genesis 6:11. I want to share something.
Okay, let me go back and get the Hebrew. Wait a minute, I'll put both of them here. 6. I'm in chapter 6, everybody, and let me quit making you dizzy. And 11.
Okay, now pull up the Hebrew over there where it says, "Now the earth was corrupt and became full of robbery." The very last word, can you highlight that?
I can highlight this one right here.
Okay, that word is Hamas.
I see that.
That word is, when it said the earth was full of Hamas, violence and robbery.
Violence and robbery.
Does anyone recognize that word? It's used a lot in our day and time.
Yeah.
Okay. But the earth was full of Hamas, violence and robbery, which is the opposite of righteousness. And the corruption is the opposite of tamim. And I want to read the commentary here in the Art Scroll. How it says, "The behavior of the people deteriorated at first. They were corrupt, being guilty of immorality and idolatry. And they sinned covertly before God. Later, the earth became filled with robbery, which was obvious to all. Then the entire earth was corrupted because man, in his essence of the world and his corruption, infects all of creation. Such is the progression of sin. It begins in private. When morality begins to fall in a society, it's done in secret. And so is idolatry. It's both somewhat done in secret. Then eventually they move to the open. It says, such as this is the progression of sin. It begins in private when people still have a sense of right and wrong. But once people develop the habit of sinning, they gradually lose their shame and immoral behavior becomes accepted, even required in the norm. In Noah's time, the immoral sexual conduct of the people extended to the animals as well until they cohabited with other species. The Midrash teaches that they stole from one another. It started out, it was petty. It was in petty ways that were not subject to authority of the courts at that time. Though this is not the gravest kind of sin, it is morally damaging in the extreme because thievery within the letter of the law weakens the conscience and corrupts social fabric. So we can see here why it was important that the Creator brought out the fact that Noah was a tzaddik and he was a tamim. Because the very next couple of verses, the reason why the flood was being brought was because the earth had become the opposite of both of those. But yet, in this extreme wickedness of morality, idolatry, and robbery, and violence, and injustice, Noah held himself. He was a moral man. He didn't take part of the immorality and the idolatry. How do we know he did not take part of the idolatry? Because it says he walked with God. He knew the Creator. So he walked with the Creator. So we know he was married, and eventually he had children. We talked about that last week, about how the son shall leave the father and his mother and cleave unto us. Noah followed the laws of family purity, family purity in the way that he didn't partake in any forbidden sexual relations. He cleaved unto his wife and nothing else, only his wife.
Terry, would it take you off track if I asked you to clarify something real quick?
Go ahead.
So when the text says, and I just want to, because this is one of the things that blew my mind. You covered this when you and I were doing a teaching class here a while back, and it blew my mind. We're not just talking about Moses writing this down. The Creator told this. This came out of the
Moses wrote down the words of God that was spoken to him. God told Moses to write these words down.
I just think
that's how important this is.
Yeah.
This was not known. This was God revealing to Moses what happened before he was ever born, because it wasn't a written record. There were some oral records, but the Creator spoke these words to him, and the words we're reading here is in the Hebrew. The English is a different story. It's a translation. But in the Hebrew, these are the words that the Creator literally spoke to Moses on top of the mountain. That's how important the Torah is. There is not another document on the face of the planet that God dictated that this is what needs to be written down. And the book of Genesis is so important. It's the beginning. That's why it's called Bereshit, in the beginning of. It's the beginning. It's where we begin. Where do we begin? We begin with the Creator. It's He and He alone, and there's nothing else. And then it comes forward. And even in that, when you read Genesis 1, verse 1, that was dictated to Moses. It didn't come from Moses's mind. He didn't sit down and decide to write a novel one day. No man on earth could have ever written what's written in the Torah because it's eternal. And when you, especially in the Hebrew, it's just, it's eternal. We can study it for the rest of our lives. Well, Israel's been studying for 3,400 years and they're still learning. And we could probably study it for the next million years and won't even scratch the surface. So yeah, that's why this is important. When we read Genesis 6:9, you got to understand you're reading the very words that the Creator spoke to Moses. And then Moses wrote it down. And then through time, it came to you and I. But the Creator was the author. Moses, he was a scribe. And it's amazing. So do we see why righteousness and tamim is so important when it's mentioned about Noah? Is because the very two things that the Creator said, and God saw the earth, behold, it was corrupt. It had no tamim. And it become full of robbery. It had no tzaddik, no righteousness within it, other than Noah was the only human being alive that encompassed righteousness and tamim at the time that this was going down. So we see why the Creator tells us this was his offspring. And he was going to, he had this before he had his children. And he would carry this offspring through the flood and after the flood. And this offspring would eventually, through Noah's physical offspring, Abraham would come. And from Abraham, the children of Israel, the nation of Israel at Mount Sinai. And it was because of that Noah was a tzaddik and he was a tamim. And the rest of the world wasn't. He became a new Adam. God began the human race through Noah all over again. Because Noah, the sages says Noah was the righteous man. He was the righteous man that God would use to build the earth all over again. The humanity. Verse 13 says, the end of all flesh has come before me, for the earth was filled with robbery through them. And behold, I am about to destroy them from the earth. Now, I wanted to bring this up because, see, this is the flood. Again, so many people, including myself, grew up reading this stuff like it was a story. Most people do not grasp, and I did not grasp, but understand that there was a set system of regulation to live by in place. If there wasn't, then there would have been no reason to have destroyed the earth. There was law. There was an order already in place. And that order, we're going to find out through the understanding of righteousness, tzaddik and tamim. We're going to discover what was there and what there still is. It hasn't left. It hasn't changed. It's still the same to this day. Now, I want to bring out an interesting aspect of this passage that I just read, that and God said to Noah that the end of all flesh has come before me. The earth is filled with robbery through them. We'll bring out something interesting here. Rabbi Hirsch brings out something, and it doesn't do away with the plain teaching. This just enhances what was said. Make sure me find it here in my notes. Rabbi Hirsch brings out that the earth was corrupt before God. And he says that the earth had to be destroyed. God brought the flood because he says that the wickedness had come before him. And he come to the point, he brings out that man had gotten so bad that if he would have been left alone, he would have annihilated himself. So God brought the flood to save man. If he hadn't, we would have ceased to exist because of the work of our own hands. And so the flood is in one aspect, a salvation tool for humanity as a race. He used it to actually save us from ourselves. And he found a man among us that he protected the race. And he had to bring it to an end before man had completely destroyed every human being on earth. Now, I find that really an interesting, line of thought. We look at our world today, how easy it would be to bring the human race again to an end. But because of the covenant that God gave at the rainbow of Noah, he's not going to allow that to happen. And I'm going to eventually teach on that subject. That's a whole subject on its own. That's really interesting. And it's not just interesting. It's very sober. It's a very sobering. It's not unicorns and snow clouds, up in the sky. It's a very sobering understanding of what the sign of the rainbow is, because that's not being taught today on a wide basis. People were misusing it, but if they understood what that actually stood for, it should bring repentance. It's a very sobering thing to know what happened when the Creator gave that sign. There's a major message there for us as a human race. But that's not tonight's topic. So I'll just give you a little lead into, stay tuned. You never know when I'm going to be talking about that. Oh. Is there any questions on the issue of being righteous and tzaddik and tamim before I continue on? Any questions?
Veronica put a question, Terry, if you can look over to the chat. I'm kind of monitoring some stuff going on. If you can.
Yeah, that's exactly. He's not going to do it by water if he does it. that he can do it another way. But the whole issue is what the rainbow means for him and what it means for us from his side and our side of the rainbow. And so eventually I'll be getting into that.
Now there was a question that came in from the radio, Terry, and I was kindly holding back the questions till we got towards the end. I'm going to ask everybody else kindly to do that too. But I have privilege because I'm in the engine room and I have privilege. You made a statement. You may not want to cover that statement now. This may be one of those that you want to cover when you talk about that covenant. Left to himself. If man was left to himself, that was something somebody put in all caps. They sent it through the radio. Left to himself and a question mark.
Yes. He had become so corrupt. It began in privacy. And then we read, in a few classes back, if you wasn't able to see that, a few classes back, we discussed the beginning of idolatry, the beginning of worshiping false gods with Enosh. So you had immorality, you had idolatry that was growing in the earth. And then it grew from there to violence, injustice, and robbery. And the immorality aspect even affected the animals of the earth. It affected humans and animals. And the violence affected everything. It was horrible. I mean, it's so unspeakable was their immorality, their idolatry, and their violence, robbery, that the Creator completely erased those people away. There's no record of them. And I've got some information, the Jewish sages has the history of stuff that God spoke to them in their traditions that I'll go into again later when we talk about the rainbow and stuff. But he had to completely to do away from that crossing over. He did away with it. And what crossed over was righteousness and tamim. Now understand this. Too many people think that when someone is righteous, they're perfect. No. Righteousness and being perfect is two different things. We're never asked to be perfect. We're asked to progress, to grow. That's why we have free will. That's why we learn. That's why we start out as an infant totally ignorant and we come forward and we grow and we learn. And a righteous man learns from his mistakes. If he never makes mistakes, he never learns. Does that make sense?
Yes, I think that's great, Terry, the way you're explaining it.
So righteousness does not mean that you're perfect. Righteous means that you're obeying God's commands, doing what you're supposed to do. But when you mess up, you go to the Creator. I messed up. You make teshuvah, you make repentance, and in that repentance is that we're to do our best not to make that mistake again. We're to try. Not saying that we won't, but our goal and our desire should be to grow from that point forward. That's what a righteous man is. A righteous man makes mistakes. Every one of us made mistakes. Noah made mistakes. Abraham made mistakes. Moses made mistakes. Moses sat down and listened to the very words of God and wrote them down. And yet he made a mistake and wasn't able to go into the land. And God shows us that no one's a respecter of persons, no matter how righteous you are in your walk and your closeness to God, does not mean you cannot make a mistake that will hold things back. but it doesn't mean that you are condemned forever either. Moses will forever be the prophet of the Creator. He has a place. There will be not another human being will walk in the shoes of Moses and where he stood with the Creator. But he was righteous, yet he made mistakes. And concerning verse 13 there, it says, the world will never be filled with out and out robbery. For society has penal codes and prison terms. I'm reading from Rabbi Hirsch, with which to protect itself from such crimes. But Hamas, remember the word Hamas we showed? The word Hamas, and he translated as wrongdoing. Rabbi Hirsch translated as wrongdoing or robbery, violence. Philistine is Philistine, or it's brought on by cunning. It destroys a society. There is no protection against Hamas. If man's conscience does not admonish him before God, moral corruption destroys the conscience, and thereupon the welfare of society is destroyed also. Again, that's why it's important that we've got to strive toward the righteousness of the Creator and also the Tamim. We are to, and again, righteousness is doing basically deeds and actions, the deeds and actions that you're asked to do. And now what you're asked to, who you are asked to be as a person. There's some things that doesn't, necessarily have a commandment to it, but we are obligated to. Like kindness. Kindness is an element of righteousness. So we can see here why before the flood, the Creator revealed two elements of the man who would be protected through the flood, and he would carry this being a tzaddik and a tamim through the flood, because the world was the opposite of both of those, and that's what brought on the flood. See, these are the two elements that brought on the flood. The lack of righteousness, or the right deeds and actions of a human being that the Creator has asked us to do, and the morality that we are supposed to live by. Those are the two elements that brought on the flood, and they're the two offspring. The opposite of that is the two offspring of Adam. Of Noah. All right. And I'm bringing this all up for a reason. I want to read you something from the Psalms in pertaining to this. In Psalms 15 and verse 1, the Psalm of David, God, who shall sojourn in your tabernacle? Who shall dwell upon the mountain of your sanctuary? The very next thing, there's a list of things, but the very next thing, David answers. He says, he that walks in moral integrity and practices righteousness. Right here in the Hebrew, it is tzaddik and tamim. Do we see all the way from Noah, before the flood? King David says, who will walk and stand on your holy mountain, O God? He that walks in moral integrity, he who is a tamim and practices righteousness, he who is a tzaddik. at the very least at the level of Noah. Noah is like a base level, as we will learn, is a base level of understanding righteousness and being a tamim, the moral integrity. But those two things, there's a few other things on the list, but those are the two at the very top. Because without moral integrity and practicing righteousness, the others, you're not going to walk in those. You've got to have what Noah had to make it through the flood. You're going to have that to stand on the mountain of God. Do you see why this is not a bedtime story? These are instructions from our Creator, who saved this for us in 2021 for us to learn from. Let's see here. He goes on in the tamim. To walk as a tamim is the moral way of life followed by the individual, that moral integrity which subordinates all his physical and spiritual desire without reservation to this without reservation to the sovereignty of the moral law. According to the Jewish truth, physical, sensual bestiality and spiritual elevation to God cannot coexist. God drives away immoral man from the threshold of his house. The immoral man, as well as the dishonest, the area of righteousness. Again, immoral man, tamim, dishonest one, no righteousness, have no right to dwell in the house of God. Morality, honesty, and truthfulness. Again, tzaddik and tamim. Then constitute the three requirements which the sanctuary of God's law exacts from anyone who wishes to sojourn in it and who desires to dwell on his holy mountain. For God's sanctuary is indeed a sanctuary of law. I'm just going to say this. There's groups out there that speak ill of the law of God. They want to replace the law of God, and you can't do it. The sanctuary is a sanctuary of law. And we can't, as we learned last week, a mitzvah, a command, is the will of God. And if we speak ill will, if we want something else to replace the law of God with something else, you're wanting to replace the will of God, who is God himself. That's what this message, I knew I was going to be touching on some stuff, but we got to understand that the issue of the sanctuary of God is a sanctuary of law. And I know that's a negative word, especially to a lot of people, but it's not. Torah means instruction. Torah means also law. It's translated as law even in English. King David said, I believe it's in Psalms 119, oh, how I love thy law. It is ever with me. It is my meditation of all the days of my life. It has made me wiser than my unfriendly foes. What makes you wise? What makes you righteous? What makes you tamim? What makes you stand in the house of God? His law. We go over here to another section here. Oops. My bookmark fell out. Hold on here. Let's see here. Oop, I'm in the wrong one. Scotty, read to me Genesis. Oh, no wonder I'm still in Psalms. That's why I couldn't find it. I told you I had all my books laid out here. I'll get you on the right path here. All right.
So you got it, right? You got it.
Now. I got it. I was like, I wrote my page number down on purpose in case my bookmark fell. And I'm like, wait a minute, that ain't the right. That's right. Nope, wrong book. Oh, when you study, I got to use just, it's a pathway, and you got to look around where you're at. Genesis 17, verse 1. When Abraham was 99 years old, God appeared to Abraham and said to him, I am El Shaddai. Conduct yourself before me, before my countenance, and become complete. The word complete there is tamim. God is, understand that there is a difference between Noah and Abraham. There's a lot, and this is other stuff that we'll be getting into. But understand the basics. God walked with Noah. Noah walked with God. Had a dyslexic moment there, and no disrespect to those who have it. Got it backwards. Noah walked with God, but God told Abraham to walk before him as a tamim. And there's a lot of meaning and understanding in that alone that we'll learn a little later. He says, walk before me. In the Hebrew, it's lifnei. It's the Hebrew word panei, their face. In front of his face, it means his presence. It says that to walk before me, however, means to keep God's presence in mind at all times. In the context of our verse, it means in all your ways, know God, who set limits and bounds and boundaries to every created thing. Let me say this again. In all your ways, know God, who sets limits and boundaries to every created thing, who grants freedom only within the bounds of law. This goes back again to the law of the same species. God set boundaries. Everything has a boundary. No matter how hard an oak tree tries, it'll never become a cornstalk because there's a boundary. But each one of those are set up with a divine law within itself to have the freedom to be everything it can be within its boundaries. And that is the same with you and I. God said he took Israel from us, from the nations. So there's a boundary there. There's Israel, and then there's the nations. They have a set of rules to live by. A lot of people want to pick up the Torah in the just the Tanakh and read it. Oh, that's speaking to me. No, you've got to learn who it's speaking to. And it's primarily speaking to Israel in every bit of it. But there are elements that pertain to us that Israel has been told to teach us. When, I've spoken on this several times, when it says, and you shall keep my commandments. Well, everybody reads a commandment of God. Well, I got to keep it. Well, I'm just going to ask the men, there's a commandment concerning a woman's monthly cycle. When was the last time you kept that? Are you a sinner because you don't keep that? Are you a sinner because if you do not keep that, you're violating the commandment of God. So that tells you there's a boundary. part of our duty as the nation is to learn our boundaries. We are a species. Israel is a species. What is required for us to be who we are? To walk with the Creator in what He has designed for us. There are things that are not sinful for you and I, that is sinful for Israel. There are things that are for Israel that is specifically for them, if we try to do, is sinful for us. We've got to learn our boundaries. It's called the sanctuary of law, the Torah. The Torah is a sanctuary of law. We can't get around it. The earth was created in it. The law directs everything. Like it says, everything is directed by the boundaries that are set for each created thing. And within those boundaries, there's freedom in the boundary of law. And I'm saying all this because of we're fixing to start talking about law. We're fixing to talk about law, the prohibition of theft. When we start getting into we'll be going through the divine code, and we're going to be going through the footnotes and everything, and from the Rambam, who recorded a lot of the law of the law, what's called halakha. And for those that hear some of this for the first time, it's going to seem harsh, but it's not. Remember, those that were here last week, I talked about how the behavioral guidelines, the laws that God gives us, the nations, is His love language for us. It's to protect us. And it's right. As a father, the Sheva mitzvot, as it says in Hebrew, the 7 mitzvot that came from Noah, from Adam, all the way down. When God is our father, it's like a love language. He doesn't want us hurt. But the Creator is not only a father. The Father is also a king, and He has a kingdom. And a kingdom is run on laws. Every nation is run on laws. Hold on. I knocked down my piece of paper. Y'all getting a good show tonight. I'm gonna give you an example. Did you know that in our country, the United States, that there is a law pertaining to the stop sign? For some reason, when it comes to spiritual law, people have hangups, but they don't have a problem when it comes to national law. Well, technically, the 7 commandments that God gave is passed down to us from Noah to Abraham and from Israel to us today. They are to govern a nation. They just haven't been accepted on a national basis. Now, some of it is set up within the law of God because it's practical. But every nation has a set of laws. Just like God's kingdom has a set of laws. You'll never get away from it. Well, I guess you will when you go in the ground. You know, that's the only way you can get. I guess you can get away from it, because even King David says he can't even praise. If you can't obey God's commandments in the grave. That's why it's important for us now. Not tomorrow. We're not looking toward heaven, because we don't know what's there, but we do know what's here, and we know what's required here. But like I was saying, I just want to read you a basic understanding of the law of the stop sign. I just chose something elementary. Here it goes. It reads something like this. The driver of any vehicle approaching a stop sign at the entrance to or within an intersection shall stop at the limit line. if marked otherwise before entering the crosswalk on the near side of the intersection. If there is no limit line or crosswalk, the driver shall stop at the entrance to the intersection, the intersecting roadway or railroad grade crossing. If you decide to take your case to trial, the government has to prove that you committed a violation. That means there generally must be proof of the three following elements that take up part of this offense. Number one, you approached a stop sign while driving a vehicle. Number two, the stop sign was located at the entrance to or within an intersection or prior to a railroad grade crossing. And three, you failed to come to a complete stop at the nearest of the limit line, a crosswalk or entrance to an intersection or railroad crossing. That sounds very legal, right? Well, guess what? We're going to be getting into such reading when we get into the prohibition of theft. Now, that's the reason why I wanted to share this with you, because when I start getting into some of the things from the Rambam, the way it is written, and the way things and the way you understand and read Torah is like this. It's some people are going to think this is crazy. The first point is your approach is you approach a stop sign while driving a vehicle. That should be clear. You had to be driving the vehicle first to have the offense. There is a lot of that in Torah. There's a lot of that in Torah, which when you break it down, were you driving the vehicle? It's the first point. Or who is this speaking to? That's important. Who's in the driver's seat that the law pertains to? And that's why I chose this. It's so simple. It's this is just a physical or just a national representation of what we're going to be getting into in the Torah. The reason why I chose to go through the prohibition of theft first is because theft was a major reason for the flood. Theft is the opposite of righteousness. And we're going to see it impacts every life. And I'm going to start. I may not get through. I want to go through the introduction of theft in the Divine Code, 3rd edition, starting on page 486. If you're taking notes, I'll show it for those. Let's see here. The Divine Code, Moshe Weiner, 3rd edition. Actually, this introduction is written by Rabbi Weiner, the author of the Divine Code, who put it together. This is a code. This is a legal code. I went through what I was wanting to share with you, that God's sanctuary is a sanctuary of law. And those who are not walking in that law according to righteousness, morality, and trustworthiness and honesty, and also tamim and morality, cannot stand in that sanctuary, in the sanctuary of law. It takes these two elements. I find it so interesting that the very two elements of Noah's offspring that the Creator told Moses to write down is so important. Okay, let's go to Genesis 18 and look at the situation when God was approaching Abraham at the time when he was going to come and destroy Sodom and Gomorrah. And the reason why he told Abraham his plans, he says, because Abraham taught his household, not just his children, but his manservants, his maidservants, and everyone that was in his household. He taught them, and this is what God told Moses to write down. He taught them the way of God. That's right there in the English. And then he goes on. So when you look at that and you ask the question, what is the way of God? It answers that. He says, he teaches them tzadikim and mishpatim. That is translated righteousness and justice. And the seven laws, the prohibition of idolatry, the prohibition of blasphemy, the prohibition of murder, the prohibition of theft, the prohibition of forbidden sexual relations, the prohibition of eating meat taken from a living animal, and the establishment of just courts. All 7 of those is wrapped up in righteousness and justice. And that is the way of God that Abraham was teaching. He learned these 7 precepts from Noah to Shem, and Shem and Ever taught Abraham, and Shem and Ever taught his children. And Abraham taught that to his family. This is what he taught. And God says, this is my way. This is before Sinai. This is the way of God, righteousness and justice. This is why it's important to get a positive look and viewpoint, total paradigm shift of what you've been taught about the law of God. It is not binding. It's a boundary. There's boundaries, and in the middle is a freedom you can't understand until you get there. How much freedom is it that if you live the law of the prohibition of theft on its most elementary aspect, you could leave your doors unlocked, your windows up, your car doors unlocked. You could leave your shovel and your lawnmower in the front yard. Your neighbor can do the same thing. We called that at one time Mayberry. The reason why we're not Mayberry is because our society has become immoral. It's no longer tamim, and it's no longer righteous. And therefore, when you take away tamim and you take away tzaddik, there is no freedom. You want freedom? Freedom is only found within the boundaries of the law of God. We have to have a paradigm shift on the word law, the English word law. I prefer the Hebrew word mitzvah because there's a lot more. Mitzvah means more than just law. Mitzvah is instruction. Mitzvah is deed. There's just so much more in the mental process of what a mitzvah is exactly what the Torah wants for mankind. That's how important this is. I'm hoping, Scotty, am I getting a lot of questions out there? I'm trying to explain it.
I got a page full of stuff to talk to you about here just in a minute. So just keep on going the way you're going. You just tell me when you get through.
Okay. We might go tad a little bit longer. I want to get in. I'm not going to probably really read the whole introduction, but when we definitely get into the first aspect of the prohibition of theft, we're going to get into the footnotes from the sages that Rabbi Weiner uses to explain things. And some of this is going to read like the law of the stop sign. And that's the reason why I shared that. Scotty, I guess what we need to do right here before I begin this about the lawyer. What was your question?
Okay. I hope I can present this to where you can pick up on now. And my mind was sitting here thinking about this, and actually some questions have came in about this. So again, I'm sitting here in the engine room, everybody. That's why I have leeway to do this. So
And you see, when he kind of cranks up the speed, my books fall off my shelf. Off the desk. So I'm gonna blame it on the engineer that I dropped my book.
Yeah, yeah. So when Moshe, and I've got to start at it this way, if it's okay. When Moshe was sitting on the seat, he was doing, and I'm just going to add a couple of things. He was making decisions about disputes among the people, decisions about somebody needed this or somebody desired to do this, or breakers of the law. Now, is that basically what Moshe was on the seat?
Yes.
Okay. And then we know that Jethro come in and said, okay, you're going to wear yourself out. So it went down to different, I don't know if you want to call them sages. We call them rabbis now, I guess.
Well, they were the leaders of the communities.
Okay. And these people begin to make decisions. And then if they couldn't make the decision, it would go to, maybe I can call it a higher court, and it would get on up to a higher court. Now so attorneys today, I'm going to try to present this way. Attorneys on law, since you brought in the stop sign, we have different attorneys at different levels for different law breakers or decisions that need to be made or disputes among the people.
You have business law, you have family law, you have civil law, you have
traffic court lawyers.
Yeah, all the same.
Okay. And now parallel on that with the rabbis that we have today, a lawyer has to be steeped in the law. Whatever they choose to be their speciality, they have to be steeped in that. And they are steeped in it, whatever their specialities are. Now, today and I don't want anybody to say, oh, they're calling the rabbis lawyers, but don't we have rabbis that they have specialities in different parts of the Torah? And so can I just leave it right there? Can you pick up right there?
Yeah, when I was studying and having in the classes that I was in, I'm gonna call them Torah scholars. Rabbi means teacher. A lot of people get hung up on the titles, but they're Torah scholars in their own right, in their own areas. A Torah scholar is a lawyer of Torah. You say a lawyer that comes in and he has a case and if you've ever been in a law office or watched movies about law, lawyers and things, you're going to see shelves and shelves of books. Well, it's the same way. You walk into a rabbi's house, into a synagogue, you have to look for a chair because there's a book everywhere, because they are lawyers of the Torah. Just like a lawyer of, let's say, family court, he's got a case. He's researching it. He's been taught how to research his books to find the answers he's looking for, to help him understand a case and understand the ruling of a case. And so he stands before the judge and he has his time, and he'll bring up, he says, in 1953, Smith versus Jones, the ruling of the court was this, and he brings up and showing the similarities of what's going on with this case. He's learned how to study the law. And there are lawyers that do it for the wrong reason, but I'm talking about the ones who are there for right. They've learned to study the law and how to keep the law and make sure that everybody finds justice within the law. Well, Torah scholar is a lawyer of the Torah. And that's kind of like what I enjoy it, since I've been learning from that aspect myself, for almost the last decade or so. I've kind of considered myself, I desire to be a lawyer of the Noahide Code, the code for the nations, our laws. I want to know our laws. And just like in the nation, we have lawyers of family law, we have lawyers of civic law, business law, Do you know that every one of those aspects is in the Torah? There are business laws. There are family laws. There are civil laws. There are laws for the priest, laws for the women, laws for the nations, which all the laws for Israel are based on. The 7 laws is the foundation of the 10 that's in Exodus given to Israel. So the laws that we are required to live within and to find our freedom within is the base law of humanity for all humanity. That's why it's important for us to learn it. And see, these are just categories. Theft is just a category. There are a lot of people, well, you only got 7. Well, no, there's more to that. I mean, I think some of them counted over 200 and something obligations and commands from the 7, because theft includes the law of removing someone's property. It includes kidnapping. It includes as we're going to learn here, a employer withholding a worker's wages. See, I see how all this is broke down. We're talking about righteousness and morality is found within these 7. And I'm not going to be able to finish the whole, I don't think I'll be able to finish the whole introduction. I might be able to, but let's give it a shot. Rabbi Weiner writes, the prohibition of theft is unique in that it affects almost every aspect of a person's life. Since humans are social beings who must deal with each other continuously in buying, selling, exchanging, etc., one is always dealing with others, either in person or remotely. The focus of this commandment is to accept the honor of another person, his needs, and his possessions. I want to say this again. The prohibition of theft focuses on the aspect that we are to honor another person. We are to honor that person's needs and his possessions. As the sages taught in Tractate Avot 2:12, Rabbi Yosef said, let the money of your fellow or your neighbor be as dear to you as your own. Theft in its different forms causes corruption that deteriorates and endangers a society until the brink of its destruction. This lesson was learned by humanity in the ancient of times from the generation of the flood. That's why I started with the flood tonight. From what occurred to them, we see how harsh is the punishment of theft. The decree of their annihilation was only sealed because they committed rampant theft. Even though they were very sinful with the respect of their divine commandments, as it says in Genesis 6:13, the end of all flesh has come before me, because the world is full of robbery, and behold, I will destroy the world. For all of the Sheva Mitzvot, the seven laws, the basic command is from God himself to mankind. These are basic necessities that mankind cannot evade at any time or in any way, and they were given to humanity, being to maintain their proper existence. Therefore, you must realize that the truth of these commands is that they are for your good and for the good of the whole world. The other unique point is that in order to justify accept others as equal to yourself. You must honor them and their property. This requires a sensitivity, insight, and positive feeling toward others. This comes from the recognition that you, exactly like your fellow human being, is created by the same one God for a general duty and purpose. Therefore, no individual is so more important than another. To say that his needs come totally before the needs of another person. Hence, keeping this command keeps you continuously aware of Almighty God, who is continuously creating and watching everyone and everything with his divine providence for the specific purpose he expects from mankind in general and each person in particular. Another focus of this command, which is only another aspect of the first point, is your need to be just and truthful. You must contemplate that being just and truthful is not only for the upkeep of society, but also for your own sake and your own benefit. Being truthful is being correct with yourself. And this makes you fit to recognize your own true virtues, capacities, needs, and duties. No one knows each individual person and his needs better than the Creator himself. The only way you can maximize your abilities is by doing your duty and being the person that God created for a specific purpose he has planned for you by cleaving to his commandments and the pattern he has set out for the lifestyle that he has assigned mankind, as opposed to the lifestyle that he has assigned for animals. Remember the law of kind, of species. But you need a vessel in which to receive this pattern of life, to accept it and to manage to live accordingly. This vessel is truth. This explains the special importance of the prohibition of theft. You are obligated to be extremely careful and not to steal. Since there are many details, a person's nature is to covet another's possessions, and his evil inclination tricks him with false excuses why this is permissible. These details help you focus on God's truth and your own truths. Within the 7 commandments, each one has negative aspect. Each commandment has a negative aspect. Do not commit. At the same time, each one has a positive aspect and teaches in the teachings that mold you into a better person. You should exert extra effort to learn and understand the general prohibition of theft and its details so that you can merit to be careful and not to transgress it even by mistake. Likewise, it is an obligation to contemplate your actions in order not to fall mistakenly into theft, since this is likely that it will occur when you are not taking careful notice of your own actions. Learning the details of the prohibition of theft will correct your thoughts, your actions, and you as a person. This in turn allows you and eventually all humanity to appreciate the truth and the justice of God being a king over the entire world. The fulfillment of the 7 laws, and especially the law of theft, help to perfect the world under the kingship of the Almighty. And it says, in the opposite of the world's destruction that was caused by the generation of the flood. With this, we can merit the fulfillment of God's promise in Isaiah 11:9. They will not harm nor destroy on all my holy mountain, for the earth will be filled with the knowledge of God as water covers the seabed. That's the Rabbi Weiner's introduction. Though we're almost at the end of class, we'll go ahead and do some questions if you want to. Scotty.
Okay, I was fulfilling a question over on YouTube that I think Larry answered great. If you'll look over there at a question that Sally asked on YouTube, and Larry kind of gave me a definition on that. If you want to talk about that for her, she asked about the definition. If you could give it again on, well, I've lost it now. Tamim.
Yeah, Rabbi Hirsch basically, when you look at it in line with Abraham and Noah and what King David writes in the Psalms, tamim means morality, which also includes those that aren't tamim are immoral and idolatrous. Both of those are related within tamim, which idolatrous also lines up with righteousness as well. But it's basically tamim means morality, or in the essence that we're looking at tonight in the prohibition of theft.
Right. Now, another thing, Terry, a couple of people, now when you're bringing up the situation like a stop sign, things of that nature, you're giving like parallels or things to think about, ways to better understand the text. Am I explaining that correctly?
Right. I brought up the stop sign, basically the way it is written, how it is understood. So therefore, if you're going to be declared you violated the law, there's questions that have to be answered to make sure that you were either within the law or you were outside the law. And hold on here. And I want to read one in conjunction with that. Let me see here. In Genesis chapter 17:1, since we're talking about that, there's a statement by Rabbi Hirsch I want to bring up. Let me go to it real quick here. In Genesis 4:7, here's the thing. There's words in English that has multiple words in Hebrew that's translated to one word. Sin is one of those. Okay. Hate, what's in Genesis chapter 4, means to miss the mark, which I'll go through that again sometime. I did a whole class on that passage. Well, there's another word that's translated as sin. It's called avera. It's translated as sin. Avera means, and I may be mispronouncing it wrong, but avera means overstepping. Rabbi Hirsch says, because a person does not, it says, sin is literally over, which avera is overstepping. Because a person does not sin, does not commit an avera, unless he oversteps the divine limits. All human aspirations, including physical desires, are holy and pure, provided that they do not violate the limits set by God. No human quality is good or bad in and of itself. The Torah's prohibitions do not call for a suppression or a stifling of any feature of our life. Rather, the prohibitions, like the prohibition of theft, assigns each feature in its own clearly defined area for its development. Only when these limits are overstepped does a human act becomes a sin. This is the basic character of lawlessness. And it says, conduct yourself freely within the limits set by God. And that's what the limits, the boundaries are the commandments. And then, but there's freedom there. Like I said, it's a boundary. And that's just like the issue with the stop sign, what I was trying to bring out there as just an example. When you violate a commandment, you've overstepped.
Now, a few minutes ago, you used the terminology and somebody asked about it, and I kind of clarified for you. And I'll just get you to clarify when you said that we are not bound. You're talking about when you said we're not bound, we're talking about bondage.
We're talking about it doesn't bind us from being who we're supposed to be.
Correct.
It binds us. It does bind us. It binds us from being evil.
Yes.
And wicked and being who we're not supposed to be.
Now,
I hope I said that correctly.
You did. I just put a little clarification in there on that. And now also one more thing, and I got to talk about myself before I bring this thing up. And this will probably change tomorrow now that I bring it up. But, when you take the course, let's say you're going to learn how to drive. We've got some teenagers in our family that got the book to study. Inside the book are boundaries of how to drive. Also, there are laws for a beginner. You need to know these basic laws in
like
order
the law, the stop sign, the yield
Yeah.
sign, the signals, the left and right signals.
all of those things. Now, if you obey the law, everybody comes up with this thing, and I don't know how this started. They always bring in the worst. Oh, they're going to, I don't want to say cut my head off, but cut my head off. They're going to throw me in an electric chair. Now, wait a minute. If you obey the law because of moral values that are in you and you desire to do that for the Creator, then you don't have to worry about those.
There is no penalty for being law abiding.
Say that one more time, Terry.
There are no penalties for being law abiding. A law abiding citizen can pass a police car and never even have a worry in the world.
Well, I was going to tell you a story. I got pulled over here a while back. I didn't realize what street I was on here. If it's not marked here, you got to go 20. Right. And I didn't realize what street I was on. And a police officer pulled me over, and I said I realized exactly what I was doing wrong. I done had my license and everything out. Had to, and so they went back and ran me. Now this has probably changed tomorrow. I just said, and I was not in their system. And the officer came back and said, you know what? I don't think I've ever pulled over anybody. Now, I've been driving now 50 something years. I'm not going to tell you my age, but actually I started as a teenager, as most people do. And the officer came back and they gave a judgment and said, you know what? I can see you made an honest mistake. You're not in our system, and I do not desire to put you in the system at this time. And it made me really think about from then on when I was in to, of course, I'm a slow driver anyway. But anyway, I just want to throw that in. And if you will say that one more time, there is no penalty.
There is no penalty in being law abiding, and there's no fear of punishment for the law abiding.
You're going to have to say that again.
There is no fear of punishment for the law abiding. The punishment are for those who don't obey. There's criminals. There's physical criminals and there's spiritual criminals. Those who are violating the laws of God actually violate. I mean, his laws are physical and spiritual, because theft is physical and theft is spiritual. And there are reward and penalties in life. There are reward and penalties in everything you go to do. Why would it be different with your walk with God? Why would you expect anything different? I'm just going to say this. I need to look it up, and I need to bring it. I will try to remember to bring up the source and everything the next week, Hashem willing, if my mind will remember it. Scotty, write this down for me and help me remember.
Okay.
It's called the bread of shame. It's an element that Israel teaches about. The bread of shame is receiving something for free. You didn't earn it. There is like a rule within Israel that we would be good to learn from. Let's say someone loses their job. Company goes out of business or something. They're down and out. They need help. They're about to lose their house. instead of giving them a handout, which is nothing wrong, there are times to give a handout. Don't get me wrong there. But then there are times to give what's called a loan. You give the loan to the person so they have to pay it back. Now in Israel, from a Jew to a Jew, there's no interest. That's forbidden by divine law. It's not forbidden for us. But if we wanted to do that as an act of mercy for someone's soul, give them a loan that's interest-free. But you do have a right. We do as the nations, because of the nature of God made us, to earn a living. We're not to make our living off of one person. You know what I'm saying? You like what this officer did for Scotty was showed mercy and justice at the right time. And he was wise enough to see that. Baruch Hashem, that man was wise in his observance and upholding of the law that he is supposed to as a police officer. Baruch Hashem, very wise man in what he done. We could learn from that example that Scotty gave. But in Israel, they would give a person, let's say they've almost losing everything. Maybe they're even homeless because they did lose everything. And so someone comes along that has the means to say, I'm not going to give you a handout. I'm going to give you a loan to help you set you up on your feet, help get your bills paid, help you get a job. First thing you got to do is got to get a job because you've got to pay this back. And then there's another level of helping that person set up his own business. Because when a person gets his own job or is setting up his own business, when you earn something, you're going to take care of that. You take a child and you're giving them allowance and they go buy a toy. And then you take and you give that child a toy, see which one's taken better care of. The child had to wash dishes to get his allowance. His money was earned. So when he goes and buys something, it's more precious because it's come a part of who he is. He bought it with his time. But when a person is just given something, it's a bread of shame. They don't take care of it. They have wrong attitudes toward it. And so in Israel, it's called the bread of shame. And I need to bring up a little bit more on that. But this is pertaining to the law of God. Some people want something for free. You know what? Noah had righteousness and he was tamim. His righteous was deeds and actions. He did the laws. There were 6 laws from Adam to Noah. He did those because it tells us, it says Noah, like 2 or 3 times in this story, in this recorded storyline, that Noah did everything that God told him to do. And therefore he was righteous. Okay. And then he was also moral. He was tamim. He was a moral man. It was only after that it says he found grace in God's eyes. Now the Torah Scholars tells even a deeper story about that issue, but let's just look at it from the issue of observance and being a law-abiding. He was a law-abiding person. He found grace in God's eyes and no one else did. Why? What was mentioned first? He was a tzaddik and he was tamim. And there's a whole pathway through Torah with those all the way up to Genesis 18, tzaddik and really mishpatim, or justice, when you look at it, the way of God. And so those who are looking for something free from God, instead of earning it, they're asking for the bread of shame and they're not going to take care of it. But you go out and you put your life in the hands of the commandments of the Creator, and you live your life according to the commandments. You're like the law of theft here. You're concerned about your possession, and you're concerned about your neighbor's possession like you are like your own. And then everybody's doing that. Everybody's taking care of. Like I said, we can begin to leave our doors open again, leave our windows up in the summertime. We don't have to worry about somebody going through the house, because we're more concerned about our neighbor, like we're supposed to be, then we've earned the right of freedom, a freedom that we don't know in this day and age. Just because of the law of theft is violated so strongly in this country, we don't really know the freedom that the Creator wants for us us as human beings to have. This is why the law of God is important. It is not a negative, it's a positive. It's our lifeline. If we're going to stand on his holy mountain one day, it is a sanctuary of law. And when we enter into it, it is a sanctuary of law. If we are not law-abiding citizens, we will be kicked out at the threshold. This is why we study the Noahide laws. It's named after Noah. They're named after Noah because he was given the seventh one after the flood. So, did I rabbit trail too bad there?
No, Larry says you've gone to preaching now, and he ought to know. He ought to know.
Amen, brother.
Oh,
my favorite part, like I told Message Scotty this morning, out of Psalms 119. Oh, how I love thy law. It is ever with me. It is my meditation all the days and nights. It is, it's held back my feet from the ways of this world.
Yes. I'm what you are you through with that?
Are there any questions or whatever? I know we've gone a little bit over, but
we do.
I'm enjoying myself.
I got one more little story
I had to get warmed up. You jerked the ship around, and I dropped my books, and
I got one more little story to tell. When I was 14, I wanted a bicycle, and all my friends on the block that was my age had bicycles. And I'm not saying this is a bad thing, but their parents bought their bicycles for them. They didn't have anything invested in their bicycles. And I wanted one. And I remember my grandfather taking me down. We had a little store here called TC Drake's, and it was hardware / wagon and bicycle, things of that nature. And my grandfather took me in there and said, "This boy wants a bicycle. What do you got?" And I bought that bicycle on time. I had to mow yards, rake leaves. And I had to go down there. Let me tell you what, I gave $3 every week for that bicycle. And I got that bicycle paid off. That was my pride and joy. Well, one day I was riding home from school and some other kids had their bicycles and they was jumping ramps, running through the mud. They was just creating havoc with their bicycles. And somebody said, "Hey, Scotty, come over here and jump this ramp." I said, I work for this bicycle. And I'm not going to do that to risk breaking this. I've got something invested in it. And so, we have a lot, and I just hate to say it. I'm making my dissent for Larry, for Terry. That we have a lot of people that seemingly don't have anything invested in, not even their life. And so they deem sometimes to misuse it. But if you do charity, good deeds, if you help somebody, if you see your brother in need and reach out a hand of compassion, you have something invested in life, and it will change you. It will do something to you that will make you respect not only your life, but the lives of those around you. Are you about to read something to throw in on there, Terry?
Go finish what you're saying.
Well, that's where I was going with it. That if you have something invested in it, that it means so much more to you. You will keep it in good standings with the Creator. Go ahead, Terry.
Okay, Abraham, up until Mount Sinai, Abraham and the children of Israel was still part of the nations. Okay, they were bound by the Sheva mitzvahs as you and I. It wasn't until the point of circumcision that he began to cross over into the foundation of Israel started happening, as far as the speeding up of the foundation. The foundation actually goes back to Genesis 1:1. But at this point, Abraham was still, he hadn't crossed over to the point yet of what was to become at Mount Sinai. Okay. Rabbi Hirsch, he uses a little bit of, he says, be a mensch. Everybody knows what a mensch is. A decent human being. And he's talking about someone before if they decide to join the nation of Israel, you've got to be a mensch before you join the nation of Israel. The first thing that is acquired is a humane virtues. And it says Abraham, he says, Abraham until to this point up when God is speaking to him in Genesis 17. He said, up until this point, he said, Abraham demonstrated the qualities, and he was the embodiment of being a true, what we call today in English, a Noahide, one who observes the 7 laws of Noah for mankind. It says he was compassionate, forgiving, and benevolent. And that is the embodiment of being a decent human being. And we know that Abraham did that because he set his tent open and let people come in and feed people and other things.
Baruch Hashem. Baruch Hashem. Okay, Terry, are we coming to a close?
Yes, we
okay.
Any major questions or anything that we need?
I don't have any more on my end, but maybe this week, if you're watching this video or if you're watching a recording of the live feed, feel free to kindly send us a message, and we'll try to respond to those if possible. And we may respond to them at that time, or we may respond to them in a future date. I also want to give a plug for something, Terry, if we're coming to a complete close.
Yeah, we're fine.
Okay. When Rabbi Pesach was here, he often, we're using his channel, we're using his feeds, things that he has worked hard to set up. And I want to ask you, I don't do this often, but I want to ask you, for those of you that, you may not donate anywhere, if you'll go to Torah for the Nations website, that's Torah for the Nations. Is that .org or .com, Terry? Is it .org?
I can't remember because I've got it on my address bar and I just click it.
Okay. Yeah. I think it's Torah for the Nations.org.
But it's his website.
It's his website, Torah for the Nations website. And there's a donate button there, and he would so greatly appreciate anything. They are going into Pesach now. They're in Israel, and Rabbi Pesach has told me that they help other families help provide things that they need for Pesach.
Right. And he has not asked us to do any of this.
No,
okay.
No.
He has not asked us. Understand, Israel went into major lockdown. They were probably locked down more than any country that we know of. He and his wife basically was locked down from March to March. Okay. For a whole year, the whole country. There was a few times when they tried to come out of that, but it wasn't time. So they went back into lockdown, wasn't allowed to be no more than a few meters from from their house. They weren't permitted to have people over in their house, only the immediate what we call the nucleus family. So last year at Passover, families didn't get together. This is the biggest, one of the biggest family get-togethers of the year for the Jewish nation. They actually travel other countries to spend time with family members that are in other countries. like America and just in Europe and places like that. Last year, they did not get to see it. There are people who didn't get to see their mother and their father, and they passed away this year.
Correct.
Or their grandparents. And so this year, they are able to get together in families for the first time in a year. And some of them, because of the lockdowns, they need help. And people in this country and in any country out there that's listening to us that's been in lockdowns knows what it's done financially to you and everything. But this is their if you love Israel, help another family get together with a family member that they've not seen in a year.
Yes.
So that he did not ask us for that.
Correct. I felt impressed to do that. So
he's our teacher. We love him, and we respect him. We lift him up as our teacher.
All righty. Well, as we come to a close, Larry, but after I quit the live stream, I want to talk to you just for a second. We appreciate Larry coming tonight. Let's see. We had a couple others that came in, and I saw Dan come in, and he had to leave. And was it Wendell? Did Wendell come in and he had to leave? But we
went a little longer than normal.
Little longer. I want to thank Veronica Port for sticking with us tonight. Bless her heart. And of course, Larry and my wife stuck here with us. That's, I would tell you something right now, but I won't. I'll wait till after we quit our stream. And Anuela is always with us. And I think that Thomas had to leave. But we thank Thomas for coming. And so we'll be back next Wednesday night at 8:00. Now, remember, for the next, if I'm not mistaken, the next 2 Sunday nights, Rabbi Pesach will not be having his Sunday night gathering class, but we will be here next Wednesday night at 8 p.m. Is that correct, Terry?
Yeah, Hashem willing.
Hashem willing. Okay, everybody. Until next time, we'll see you then.